The moment I stepped through that front door, his mother looked at me the way people look at a stray that's wandered onto a clean porch. Her eyes moved from my clearance rack flats to my drugstore earrings to the small canvas tote I was using as a purse. Not a designer bag, just a tote from a farmer's market with a sunflower on it. And I watched her face do that thing where polite and contemptuous try to share the same expression, and neither one wins. She leaned toward her husband and said something low. Something she thought I couldn't catch over the sound of the string quartet playing in the next room. She said I looked like the catering staff had let someone in through the back. I smiled. I set my farmer's market tote down on the marble entryway table, and I thought, this is going to be a very interesting evening. My name is Simone. I'm 31 years old, and I have a confession that I've been sitting with for a while now. For the past 16 months, I let the man I was falling in love with believe I was someone I wasn't. Not in the way people lie. I never told him a single false thing, but I didn't correct his assumptions either. And the assumptions he made were significant. He thought I was a paralegal. He knew I worked at a law firm downtown. What he didn't know, what I never volunteered, was that I was a named partner at that firm, that my name was on the door, that I billed at $420 an hour and had more in my investment portfolio than most people see in a lifetime of paychecks. Before you judge me for that, let me tell you about my grandmother. She raised me from the time I was 9, after my mother passed and my father decided fatherhood was optional. She lived in a 3-bedroom house in a modest neighborhood outside Nashville, drove a 12-year-old Buick, bought her clothes at Tuesday morning, and made the best biscuits I have ever tasted in my life to this day. She clipped coupons. She brought casseroles to sick neighbors. She wore the same pearl earrings to church every Sunday for 40 years. She was also one of the most quietly wealthy women in 3 counties. She had built a small property management company in her 30s, grown it steadily, sold it in her late 50s for more money than I could comprehend at the time. She told almost nobody. When she passed, she left me everything. She also left me a letter, handwritten in the careful cursive she'd learned in a schoolhouse with no air conditioning, that I still have folded in the nightstand drawer beside my bed. She wrote, "The only way to know the true nature of a person is to let them believe you have nothing to offer them. Watch how they treat you then. That's who they really are. So when my boyfriend, I'll call him my boyfriend because that's where he was, even though it gets complicated. When he invited me to Sunday dinner at his parents' house, when he mentioned carefully that his mother was, quote, particular about first impressions, I made a decision. I would let them see what they expected to see. I drove my older car, a reliable but unremarkable Civic that I kept around for exactly these kinds of occasions. I wore my most forgettable dress, navy blue, from a department store that no longer exists, with the farmer's market tote and my drugstore earrings. I pulled my hair back simply. I looked, very deliberately, like someone who was grateful to be included. And I watched. His family lived in a neighborhood where the driveways were longer than some streets I'd lived on, the kind of neighborhood where the landscaping is too perfect to be natural, where you suspect someone measures the grass. Their house was a colonial with black shutters and a fountain in the circular drive, the kind of house that's meant to communicate something about the people inside before you've even rung the bell. I had done my homework. His mother, who I'll call his mother, had come from old Louisiana money, the kind that was impressive 2 generations ago, and had been living off its reputation ever since. His father had built a regional chain of luxury car dealerships across 4 southern states, which sounded more profitable than it currently was. I'd looked at their public filings. His older sister, who I'll call his sister, was the one who complicated things. She was 36, worked nominally in the family business, and had been engaged twice without following through. She wore a diamond tennis bracelet to Sunday dinner that I estimated at roughly $18,000, and she greeted me with the kind of hug that has no warmth in it at all. Just arms. Just going through the motions of arms. His father shook my hand too firmly, the way men do when they want you to know they're still strong. His mother offered hers with a kind of gracious condescension, as though I were a child she was being patient with. There was one other person at dinner I hadn't expected, an older woman, a family friend, they said, who was introduced to me simply as a close family friend of many years. She had silver hair and reading glasses on a chain, and she watched everything without seeming to. When we shook hands, she looked at me for a moment with an expression I couldn't quite read, like she recognized something she was trying to place. We sat down to dinner. His mother had clearly rehearsed this. The questions came in a particular order, with a particular rhythm, the rhythm of someone building a case. Where did I grow up? A small town outside Nashville. True. My family, my grandmother raised me. Also true. What had my grandmother done? She'd been in business. True, if incomplete. What kind of business? Small stuff, I said. Nothing very exciting. My mother pressed her lips together in a way that suggested she found this about as surprising as she'd expected. Then she asked about my work. I said I was at a law firm. She nodded. She said she was sure I was very good at what I did. The what I did was doing a lot of work in that sentence. I said thank you. Then his sister mentioned a name. Said it lightly, the way you drop something and pretend it's accidental. She said she'd run into a woman I'll call the ex at a charity event the previous weekend. Said she looked wonderful. Said her family's real estate investment company was expanding into a new market. His mother's face lit up with a warmth I hadn't seen directed at me once. She said the ex had always been an exceptional young woman. So polished. So suitable. She had been with my boyfriend for almost 4 years before they ended things. Had I known that? She said it with a smile that suggested she hoped I hadn't. I said I hadn't known. She said it had been such a shame. Everyone had expected them to end up together. Their families' businesses would have complemented each other so naturally. The ex's family's firm worked with exactly the kind of high-end residential developments that would have been perfect for his father's dealership clients. The implication was clear as a bell. I looked up at the wall behind his mother's head. There was a gallery of framed photographs, holidays, galas, what looked like a graduation, and in at least 3 of them, a beautiful woman with dark hair was standing beside my boyfriend, their heads tilted together, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. I recognized her from the family's social media accounts. The ex, his mother followed my gaze. She didn't say anything, she just let me sit with it. His sister added, almost as an afterthought, that the ex was still single. It was funny, really. A woman like that, still unattached, almost like she was waiting for something. I smiled. I said she sounded remarkable. His sister's face flickered. That wasn't the reaction she'd wanted. His mother recovered first. She said, yes, remarkable, and then she patted the table between us in a way that felt like punctuation and said she was sure I had my own wonderful qualities. That not everyone was built for the kind of life their family lived, and there was no shame in that. Some people were better suited to simpler circumstances. Simpler circumstances. My boyfriend shifted in his seat. He said something about how his mother didn't mean anything by that. His mother patted his hand. She said of course she didn't. She was just being honest about what she saw. I kept my face very, very still. The family friend spoke then, for the first time since we'd sat down. She said that in her experience, the simplest lives often turned out to be the fullest. She said her own mother had lived simply and died at 91 without a single regret she knew of. His mother gave her a look that could have curdled cream. The family friend looked right back at her, completely unruffled, and then looked at me. I gave her a small smile. She returned it. Dessert was a creme brulee that cost more per ramekin than some people's hourly wage, and while we ate it, I filed away everything I had learned. This family measured people in balance sheets and bloodlines. They saw my quiet dress and my farmer's market bag, and they had already decided what I was. Someone temporary, someone manageable, someone they could remove when it was convenient. And my boyfriend, the man who had told me 6 weeks earlier that he was falling in love with me, he sat through the entire dinner without once saying anything that cost him anything, Not once. I had one more thing I needed to do before the evening was over. I excused myself to find the restroom. I didn't need the restroom. The hallway that led toward the back of the house was lined with a particular kind of Southern family art. Oil portraits, framed newspaper clippings, a shadow box of military medals. I walked slowly. And then I heard voices from behind a half-open door. His mother's voice, his sister's. I stopped. His mother was saying they needed to move carefully, that the situation was becoming more serious than they'd anticipated. that he had told her in a moment of vulnerability that he was actually considering a future with me. His sister said that was the problem, wasn't it? She said he always did this, got attached to the wrong person when the right one was right there. His mother said the Hendersons were growing impatient, that the partnership they'd been discussing for a year and a half depended on the family connection they'd hoped would formalize naturally. That the ex and her family had been patient, but patient had a limit. I stood very still in that hallway. The Henderson family, that was the ex's family, the real estate investment firm. His father's dealerships had been struggling since the luxury vehicle market softened. The Henderson partnership wasn't just an opportunity, it was a lifeline. His sister said at least this woman was too naive to figure any of that out, that she was clearly sweet, clearly grateful, clearly the kind of girl who wouldn't ask questions that made people uncomfortable. His mother laughed softly. She said that was precisely the point. She said she'd spoken to her son about the situation, that he understood what was at stake, that he was going to do what needed to be done. It just might take some delicate handling. And then his sister said something that made the floor shift under my feet. She said, "The engagement party is in 3 weeks. Let him announce it with this one. Keep the Hendersons waiting just a little longer. Make sure the ex thinks she still has a future here. And then we find a quiet reason to end things with the girlfriend before it goes any further. Blame it on incompatibility. Blame it on her. It doesn't matter." His mother said yes. She said it would work itself out. I walked to the restroom. I ran cold water over my wrists. I looked at myself in the mirror above the sink. A mirror that was probably worth more than the car I'd driven over in, and I thought about my grandmother. She wrote, "Watch how they treat you when they think you have nothing to offer them." I thought, I've seen enough. I thought, but I'm not leaving yet. I walked back to the table with a smile on my face that I did not feel, and I sat down for coffee, and I listened to his mother talk about a charity auction she was chairing, and I thought about what I was going to do next. 2 days later, I called the family friend. I'd found her through a mutual connection. She had her own long and complicated history with this family, a business deal many years ago that had ended in the kind of loss that people carry quietly but don't forget. When I called and explained what I'd heard, there was a long silence on her end. Then she said, "I've been waiting for something like this for a long time." She was in. Over the following 3 weeks, I did what I do. I research for a living. I build cases. I find the facts that other people have missed or overlooked or deliberately obscured, and I lay them out in a sequence that cannot be argued with. What I found, the dealerships were in significantly worse shape than their public filings suggested. Creative accounting had kept the worst of it off the official numbers, but I knew what to look for and I found it. His sister had been quietly pulling funds from the company's operating accounts for years. Small amounts first, then larger ones, routed through vendor payments that didn't hold up to scrutiny. It was embezzlement, clean and simple, and it had accelerated exactly as the company's margins had shrunk. And my boyfriend, the man who told me he loved me, had had dinner with the ex 4 times in the past 2 months. Not that I was counting. I had photographs of 2 of those dinners. I hadn't been looking for them. I'd happened to be meeting a client near the restaurant the first time, and the second time I'd stopped because I saw his car. He was leaning across the table. She was laughing. He was holding her hand. I added everything to a folder. And then, the week before the engagement party, I gave him the chance to tell me the truth. We were at his apartment, going over what he described as last-minute logistics for the party. It was a nice apartment, big windows, good light. He'd made pasta from scratch because he knew I loved it, and for a moment I almost let myself forget. I asked him casually how things were going, if there was anything on his mind. He said everything was great. He said he was excited about the party. He said I was the best thing that had happened to him in years. I asked if he'd been in touch with the ex recently. He said they were old friends, that he'd run into her at an event. It was nothing. I nodded. I said I understood, and I understood completely. The night of the engagement party, I got dressed in my own clothes. For the first time. Not my modest navy dress. Not my farmer's market tote. My closet, my actual closet, the one that reflected 16 years of hard work and very deliberate choices, has things in it that would have made his mother's polished smile crack right in half. The dress I chose was a deep burgundy, custom-tailored by a woman I'd worked with for a decade, cut from a silk that moved in a way that cannot be faked. My jewelry was my grandmother's, a strand of pearls that had been appraised at more than most people's cars, and diamond studs so classic they barely looked real. I looked in the mirror. I said, "Okay, Grandma, let's go." The party was at a rented event space in one of Nashville's older neighborhoods, a converted mansion with valet parking and a string quartet and past hors d'oeuvres that were very good and very small. His mother had invited everyone who mattered to her in 3 counties. Business contacts, society friends, the kind of people who would have been useful to know during the Henderson negotiation. I handed my keys to the valet. He gave my car a slightly puzzled look. The car wasn't wrong for the neighborhood, but it wasn't the same car they'd expected from someone in my navy dress and farmer's market tote. Inside, I moved through the room slowly. The first person to notice was his father. He was standing near the bar talking to a man I recognized from the business filings, a regional director for one of the luxury automotive brands his dealerships carried. His father saw me and his expression went through 3 different things in about 2 seconds. Recognition, confusion, something that might have been alarm. I said good evening. I thanked him for the beautiful party. He said something that wasn't quite words. I moved on. His mother found me before I found her. She was in the center of the main room, doing what she did. Holding court, accepting admiration, performing warmth for an audience. She turned when someone near her looked past her, and then she saw me. It was a remarkable thing to watch. Her face did not fall. His mother was too practiced for that. But something behind her eyes shifted, like a lever that no longer did what she expected it to. She said my name. The way you say something when you're not sure if you're pronouncing it correctly. I said her name back. I told her it was a beautiful party. I told her I'd been looking forward to it. Her eyes were moving the whole time, taking inventory, the dress, the pearls, the cut of the fabric. She had enough money to know what money looked like, which made this even better. She asked me where I'd found the dress. I said a friend had made it for me, a designer friend, and I said the designer's name. The designer's name was a name that appeared in magazines, the kind of designer who had a wait list measured in years, not months. His mother blinked. His sister materialized at her mother's elbow. She looked at me the same way, did the same inventory, arrived at the same place of deep confusion. She said the dress was very interesting. She asked if it was vintage. I said no. I said it was made for me last spring. There was a silence between us. Then I excused myself to find my boyfriend, and I left them standing there whispering. The news was moving through the room. I could see it, the way people leaned toward each other, the brief flickers of attention, the phones pulled out and checked. People were looking things up. People were talking. Good. My boyfriend found me near the entrance to the garden. He was pale in the way that people get when they've already heard more than they were ready to hear. He said my name in a tone that was trying very hard to sound calm. He asked what was going on. He asked where I'd gotten the dress. He asked why people were looking at me like that. I said, I'm dressed like myself tonight. I said, I thought it was time. He said he didn't understand. I said, you will. I took his arm and walked him toward a group of people I'd been looking forward to meeting. The regional automotive director his father had been trying to impress, the woman from a private equity firm who managed acquisitions in the region, and, in the corner, my colleague and friend who had practiced real estate law alongside my firm for 15 years and knew the Hendersons personally. I introduced myself by my full name. I mentioned the firm. I watched them connect the pieces. The automotive director said he'd heard of me. His firm had used our firm for contract work 2 years ago. The woman from private equity said she'd met my grandmother decades ago at a conference in Atlanta. She said the Graham name, well, my grandmother's name, still carried a lot of weight in certain circles. I felt my boyfriend's arm go rigid under my hand. He had never asked about my grandmother. Not really. He'd asked the surface questions, when she'd passed, how she'd raised me, what she'd been like. He hadn't asked about her work. He'd assumed, from the modest house I'd grown up in, from the way I dressed, from my quietly practical car, that there wasn't much to ask about. That was his mistake. The family friend found me an hour into the party, near the garden where the fountain was running and the noise from inside was softer. She said it was time. I said I knew. She said the documentation was ready. She had spent the past 3 weeks compiling everything we'd found into a form that would mean something to the people in that room. The kinds of people who made decisions based on paper trails. His father's toast was already underway by the time I came back inside. He was thanking everyone for being there, talking about family and tradition and the bright future ahead. His voice was doing its best to be confident. His mother took the microphone next. She spoke about her son. She spoke about finding the right partner. She called me up to the stage, smiling with all the warmth of a professionally installed chandelier. She handed me the microphone. She said she was sure I had a few words to say. I looked at the room. 100 people or so. Business contacts, friends, the woman from private equity, the automotive director, my colleague, his father, his sister with her diamond tennis bracelet and her offshore vendor payments, his mother with her polished performance of graciousness, my boyfriend standing to my left trying to read my face. I said I do. I said I want to start by thanking this family for showing me exactly who they are. The room went quiet in that particular way that happens when everyone senses at once that they are about to witness something they will be talking about for a long time. I told them about the dinner, about being compared unfavorably and deliberately to my boyfriend's ex, about the comments his mother thought I couldn't hear, about what it felt like to sit at someone's table and be made to feel like a problem to be managed, not a person to be known. I told them about the hallway. I described what I had heard, the plan to use me as a placeholder, to keep the ex waiting in the wings while my boyfriend performed a public engagement, to end things with me quietly once the Henderson deal was secured. His mother's face was extraordinary. I told them about the dealerships, the financial position that was significantly worse than it appeared on paper, the accounting decisions that had kept the worst of it out of view, the desperate nature of the Henderson partnership. I told them about the embezzlement. I looked directly at his sister when I said it. She had been standing near the bar. She went very still. The family friend walked forward from the side of the room. She was carrying a leather portfolio. She handed it to the automotive director, who had gone completely expressionless in the way of someone who has just confirmed something they had suspected. She said she had documentation. She said she had been documentation. She said she had been waiting a very long time for the opportunity to present it. His mother found her voice. She said this was outrageous. She said I was a troubled woman making baseless accusations. She said she would have her lawyers involved before the night was over. I said she was welcome to call them. I said everything in that portfolio was a matter of verifiable public record or documented private transaction that would hold up to scrutiny. I turned to my boyfriend. I said, I gave you a chance to be honest with me. Last week in your apartment, over pasta you made from scratch. I asked you directly about the ex. You looked me in the face and told me she was just an old friend. He said it was complicated. He said his family had put him in an impossible position. He said he had real feelings for me. I said, I know. I think that part might even be true. I said, but a man who will sit through a dinner where his mother calls his girlfriend common and say nothing, that man is not someone I can build a life with. And a man who looks me in the face and lies when I give him the chance not to, that man is not who I thought he was. I reached into my purse. I took out the ring he had given me 3 weeks earlier. A large, showy thing that had looked more impressive in the dim lighting of his family's sitting room than it did now, under the chandeliers, where its flaws were visible. I set it on the podium in front of me. I said, I won't be marrying you. I said, I hope you find what you're looking for. I genuinely do. Then I said one more thing, because it was the truest thing in the room. I said, my grandmother raised me to know that the measure of a person has nothing to do with what they own or who their family is. She lived in a modest house and drove an old car, and she was one of the finest human beings I will ever know. She taught me to look for character, not credentials. I came here tonight looking for character. I didn't find much. I picked up my purse. I stepped off the stage. The room parted in front of me like water. Behind me, I could hear the noise starting, his mother's voice rising into something controlled and brittle, the low, urgent sound of his father's name, his sister saying something fast and panicked to her husband, the automotive director making a call. I didn't turn around. The valet looked pleasantly surprised when I asked for my car. He brought it quickly. I tipped him well. I drove home with the radio off, all the windows down, the Nashville spring air coming in cool and easy against my face. My apartment, when I got there, felt like the first honest room I'd been in all night. I made tea. I changed into pajamas. I sat on my couch, and I thought about my grandmother and the way she used to sit in her kitchen on Sunday evenings, radio on, peeling apples for a pie that nobody had asked for, but everyone was glad existed. She didn't need an audience for anything. I thought about that for a long time. 2 weeks later, a short item ran in the local business section. The automotive brand had declined to renew its franchise agreement with the regional dealership group, citing concerns about financial management. Without the franchise agreement, the business model wasn't viable. The article mentioned an internal review that had uncovered financial irregularities. It did not mention me. I had asked the family friend to keep my name out of it. She had. She owed me, she said. I told her we were even. My boyfriend texted 3 times. The last message said, "I know I don't deserve anything from you, but I want you to know I'm sorry. Not for what my family did, for what I didn't do when I had the chance." I read it twice, then I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter and went to water my plants. Some mornings I still wear those drugstore earrings. I still have the farmer's market tote. I still drive the Civic on days when I don't feel like being anything in particular, when I just want to get coffee and sit by the river and not have any of it mean anything. My grandmother was right the way she was right about most things. The only way to know who someone really is to let them believe you have nothing to offer. Watch what they do then, that's who they are.